Hi, my name is Philip Likens. This is my talk from Mobile Camp Chicago 2014. We didn't record the talks at the conference, so I thought I'd go back and record it for posterity's sake. So this is my talk, Experiencing the Mobile Mainframe. My name is Philip Likens, as I said. I have two boys and a wife in Dallas. Last year I released iHeartColor, a color palette manager for iPhone. I run cross-train camps, which is kind of a cross-functional training conference event group. And then I've been in industry for about 16 years this month, which is May 2014, in some way. So in the interactive space, I've taught. I've done a bunch of different things, but I've been involved in some sort of interactive design and development for the last 16 years. So that's kind of who I am. Outside of work, in my current job, I am the principal UX designer at Sabre Labs. Sabre is a big travel technology company. You might know us. We own Travelocity, but we kind of spun out from American Airlines a long time ago. We do back-end travel-related systems, taking bookings for airlines and hotels and things like that. And we do software and different things for travel. So I work on the labs team. We're a small cross-functional team focused on the intersection of travel and future technology, about 2 to 5 years out. And so we end up experimenting with a lot of new technologies as they come available, such as indoor location, wearables, and things like that. So that's kind of where this talk originated. So my talk is Experiencing the Mobile Mainframe. So what in the world is the mobile mainframe? Well, I feel like when we talk about wearables, and even when we talk about devices in our homes, a lot of times we talk about the Internet of Things or connected devices, but specifically with wearables, all of the wearables currently on the market are piping data to and from our mobile. So our mobile is sort of acting like a mainframe computer, and our devices are actually these terminals that just display the information, take in input, but it all kind of goes through the mobile ultimately. And what's more is my fitness band doesn't talk to my watch doesn't talk to Google Glass. Instead, all of those things talk to my mobile, and my mobile talks to all of those things. So I kind of coined a new term because I felt like it was a better picture of what's really going on, at least currently in this space. I think things will change down the line, but this is kind of what's currently happening. And so our mobile devices are these like powerful, always connected things, and it's actually working. Well, we'll see. We'll see how it's working. But this is my attempt. This presentation is my attempt to get traction with these devices. Now, this is a picture of Grace Murray Hopper. This is after what happened, but in 1945 she found what we have come to know as the first computer bug, or at least that's how the story goes. There was a moth caught in the Harvard Mark II computer, and it was causing problems, and so she pulled it out, and that's where the term debugging and things kind of came from. Now, so when I thought about the mobile mainframe, I kind of thought about this story, and I thought, okay, what's the moth in the mobile mainframe? Like, what's the bug? What's the problem? And so you'll kind of, I'll refer to that as I go through this talk. What is the moth in the mobile mainframe? And then kind of what can we do about that? So most of this talk is centered around wearables, specifically. So you can control things in your home with your mobile phone. and that's sort of a form of the mobile mainframe. But I'm going to specifically kind of zero in on wearables today. So for me specifically, I had a Fitbit, and then other wearables started coming out, like Google Glass, and I just kind of went, I don't know what to do with any of these things. So maybe I need to figure it out as an interaction designer. So my questions, I kind of had 4 questions as I went, and they were, what in the world are wearables? And I'm going to kind of address that over the whole presentation. And then what kind of experiences can they provide? So I'm a UX designer. I care about the experiences that these devices can provide. How do I design for them? So how do I actually design for them rather than just be a consumer? And then what does the future look like? And I'll make some kind of speculative remarks about that. So one way that we can kind of figure out what wearables are, or what the mood is around wearables, is to look at the press. So here are some things recently from the last 6 months about wearables and the mobile mainframe. So this is by Endeavor Partners, and they basically said half of U.S. consumers who have owned a modern activity tracker no longer use it, and a third of U.S. consumers who have owned one stopped using the device within 6 months. So this is kind of the downside, right? And I've heard this called mothballing, where you put a device on the shelf and it just collects dust, or you've got to use mothballs to keep the moths away, right? So this is mothballing, and it's a current critique, right? And it's valid. A lot of people have put these devices on the shelf. So that's one thing that the press is saying. Then you've got this recent move by Nike to lay off a bunch of the engineering team who developed the Fuel Band and the other Nike Plus stuff. And I'm not sure exactly why Nike made that move. I can kind of speculate, but this was April 2014. I think wearables are going to be around in the future, and I think fitness is a piece of that. Now, not to skip ahead, but it may be that fitness bands kind of go away in some way or the other, or maybe Nike feels like other companies can do this better than them, and they can just kind of write software or ride those other waves. And so, I can't really speculate on or tell you why they did this, but this was, for some people, this was a real big red flag, right? That wearables are dying and it's crisis mode and all this stuff, and I don't think that's it. I think Nike has their own reasons for doing this, and I'm not sure what those are. But I don't think it spells disaster for wearables in general. Then you've got Evernote CEO Phil Libin. Sorry if I misspelled his name or mispronounced his name. But I'm going to read this whole thing. A big reason for why we even launched the Evernote market over 6 months ago was to get experience designing for the real world. So Evernote has a physical goods market. Like they have their own version of moleskins, and they have backpacks and all these different things. So he explained, it's going to be very hard for companies to be successful if they don't understand how to design for the physical world. The whole nature of these devices is that they're going to succeed or fail based on the experience that they give you. And the whole experience is very tactile and very tangible, and it's not just sitting in front of a computer typing. And I agree with this. And I even think that there's a bit of a shift coming. Again, the adoption rate on wearables is not too high, especially glass and these watches. Fitness bands represent most of the market, but even still, I think wearables are becoming the front end of mobile devices. So designing for the front end of mobile devices is going to be designing for wearables at least some percentage of the time. And I think it's going to grow. So I think it's going to be an interesting kind of shift. Um, and in some ways, I think Don Norman and some people like that have a leg up on us who have been studying and thinking about the design of physical goods in the real world versus just the people who have focused on software their whole career, like I have. Um, so the next thing is Nielsen did some studies. 70% of consumers are aware of the existence of wearables. The adoption rate currently sits at 15%, and about half those people who have purchased wearables are between the ages of 18 and 34, and fitness bands currently are the most common type of wearable. And all that kind of makes sense, I think. And then you've got, just the other day, PayPal announced that they're teaming up with the Samsung Galaxy people, and they're going to test out paying with a smartwatch in Starbucks. And so, obviously there are some people like the people with Evernote, like the people with PayPal, that actually believe that wearables have something to do with the future, and I would agree with them. So, just to be clear, a wearable is a computer that you can wear on your person, and right now it is usually linked to your mobile device. And it can do some sort of sensing and computing and different things. So that's kind of what wearables are. So my next question was, what kinds of experiences can they provide? And for me, I kind of went through Fitbit, Glass, MetaWatch, Pebble, and Gear. And I went through 4 different phones and all over a few months' time, kind of from the beginning of 2014 through May of 2014. And so I'm going to talk about my personal experiences with these devices and kind of what I think was good and what I think was not so good. And that, I think that helps if you haven't experienced these devices to get a kind of a feeling for all of them. So I'll start with Fitbit. The real pro with Fitbit is a fitness tracker. It's the red band on this guy's arm. I think the pro to fitness tracking in general is that people can understand it. Like they can understand that this band can know how many steps I walked, or could even read my heartbeat or other information about my well-being. I think that's understandable. I think people have a conceptual model for that. I think the moth in this case is that fitness trackers don't always understand us. So for me, I have a 6-month-old baby boy, and I'll kind of rock him to sleep, or sometimes I'll stand and hold him, and I'll kind of bounce in place, right? And I'll pat his bottom to make him, to kind of soothe him, right? Well, in patting his bottom, my Fitbit has a gesture of whenever you kind of shake it, it thinks that you're trying to do something. So it thinks you're trying to check the battery life, or it thinks if you tap it for long enough or shake it for long enough that you're trying to put it in sleep mode. Well, I'm not trying to put my fitness tracker in sleep mode. I'm actually trying to put my baby into sleep mode. But the fitness tracker thinks that I'm trying to manipulate it. And so, could Fitbit have understood that was going to be my use case? Probably not. Like, they can't design their wearable and change things specifically for that use case. But does it fail to understand what I'm doing? Yeah, it does. And so that's kind of one of the drawbacks that I've seen. And then step counts aren't always accurate and things like that. And to be honest, fitness trackers have gotten a lot of flack for mothballing, right? But in reality, what's the fall off rate or the mothball rate for dieting, right? In January, everybody kind of commits to a diet and they commit to go to the gym, and eventually all that stuff falls off for most people. And so we're criticizing that the device manufacturers or the market of fitness trackers, but in reality, it's the whole fitness market. It's kind of the way things work. And so I'm not so down on fitness trackers in that regard because I think we as humans exhibit this behavior in general. So anyway, that's my experience with Fitbit. There are other fitness trackers too, Jawbone Up and Nike Fuel Band and all those. But I have experience with the Fitbit. The next thing that I really tried was glass. I ran around for a month and plus, and I've kind of experimented since then. But I think the pros to glass is their focus on glance. So these 1 to 2 second interactions. And Jen Long, as a UX designer, she's worked on glass, and she presented at the Big Design Conference in 2013. And she talked about, that those glance interactions of, I'm just going to get a little bit of information, and then I'm going to go back to the real world. And glass allows you to do that fairly well. For me, I've enjoyed, being able to capture moments with my family on the fly. So being able to capture my 2-year-old doing something silly really easily, or something like that. And then the other kind of killer app for glass is just GPS, and specifically in the car. So there's a lot of people that I've talked to who have said, "Oh yeah, glass is okay," or "I don't understand glass. I really think it should be outlawed in the car." And I'm like, "Okay, have you ever tried it in the car? Have you ever worn them at all? Like, do you know what it's like?" It's not an immersive experience, really. It's just as problematic, or maybe even less problematic than you actually engaging with your phone, because I don't have to look down or to the side or away. I just look up at this screen and then I'm back to what I'm doing. So it's in some ways less immersive than actually using a mobile phone. And so I've found that GPS in the car is actually a pretty good experience with glass, because whenever it wants me to turn somewhere, I can glance up if I don't know where I am, and then I can get my eyes back on the road. Where if I had my phone, I would have to kind of lift it up and maybe unlock it or whatever. The moth, however, is that I look like an idiot in glass. I really think I do. And it puts a barrier between me and the people that I'm talking to. It's sort of an intimidating thing. And add to that, I don't see a real application for the consumer yet. And so as a consumer, I don't know what to do with glass. And I don't think anybody else understands it really. Like, if you haven't used glass, you don't understand it. And so I think that's going to affect the laws that get put in place and things like that. Where I think glass could succeed is in business and industry and logging information and being a heads-up display. So if you need both your hands free and you need some information, I think glass can fulfill that need. But generally, that's not a consumer need. That's, I think, a business or an industrial need. So I can see applications there. And then I played with MetaWatch and Pebble, and we were fortunate enough to meet with the MetaWatch guys, and they are a great set of guys. So we really love the MetaWatch guys. For me, MetaWatch and Pebble kind of go hand in hand. They're competitors doing similar things. I think MetaWatch is kinder with notifications, but the Pebble platform is a little bit more flexible. My wife actually tried my MetaWatch, and she loved the notifications. But what I've noticed is kind of the moth in this scenario is bad connectivity. She had problems with the MetaWatch dropping the syncing. And I noticed this with Pebble too. And I think what it is, if I were just to speculate, I think it's because these are third-party devices where you've got Gear by Samsung paired up with Samsung phones. And I think they can make that work really well. And I think you've got Android paired up with the Glass, generally, sometimes iOS, but mostly with Android. And that works fairly well. And so I think this will probably get resolved eventually. But third-party wearables that really depend on connectivity for their functionality are having a hard time right now. But I think what really kind of made me grab hold of wearables a little bit was one, the notification. So the idea that I can get a notification on my wrist that I have a phone call or that I have a text message, and I don't have to go dig around in my pocket to see those things, is a real pro for me. But the other thing that sort of solidified this was, as insane as it is, Evernote on the Pebble Watch. And for me, I went, why would I ever need Evernote to be on my watch? Like, that doesn't make any sense. I love Evernote, but why would I need it on my watch? Well, as I was playing with these devices, I said, okay, I'm just going to experience the whole thing. So I made a grocery list in Evernote, and I synced it to my watch. And then I went shopping at Target with my 2-year-old son. And if you've ever been shopping for groceries, you do one of two things, or one of three things, I guess, or two things, I guess. So you'll either have a paper list, or you'll have the list on your mobile device. Okay, and then you'll do one of two things with that. You'll either take or I guess one of three things. You'll either take the list and you'll put it in your pocket, and then you'll pull it out, and then you'll put it in your pocket, and then you'll pull it out, and it's this crumpled mess. Or you'll try to balance your paper list on the bag of peas sitting in your cart and hope that it doesn't blow off. Or you'll hold it the whole time, and you'll only have one hand to pick things up. Or you'll use your mobile device, and you'll do the same thing. You'll bring it in and out of your pocket, and you have to unlock it every single time if you're like me, and you have to have a passcode because you have your company's email on your smartphone. So it's kind of a pain. Or you'll balance your precious mobile phone on the bag of peas, precariously perched on your shopping cart, and hope that it doesn't fall off. Or you'll hold it the whole time, and that's no fun. And so the interesting thing was I had Evernote synced to my watch, to my Pebble, and I could scroll through it and I could tick things off, and I never had to touch my phone. So my phone remained in my pocket. My 2-year-old didn't want my phone because I wasn't taking it out of my pocket. I had two hands free to deal with him and to shop for groceries. And it was really a great experience. And I went, oh, this is what this experience should be like. I don't have to use my hands to hold anything. I don't have to perch anything precariously in the cart. I don't have to tempt my son with my mobile device, and I can go shopping. And so that was really a really great experience for me. And that kind of drove some of my interest and my passion for these wearable devices. And then the last one that I'll talk about is Samsung Gear. And this watch is insanely cool, and I used the first generation. The second generation is out now, and it's mostly similar, but they changed a few things. But I'll just say the display on this watch is amazing, and the functionality is really good. They've done a good job with their platform and things like that. The moth for me with this device is I have a problem with Samsung's usability. Like, they are really good at putting a bunch of features into their phones and into their devices, but I feel like they're missing some of the usability piece and missing some of the design pieces. Um, and they're missing some of the quality and some of the finer touches in their software and in their hardware design. And so specifically with this watch, it doesn't function as well as a watch as Pebble or MetaWatch do. And that's what my boss, Mark, said, was it just doesn't function as well as a watch. Because you have to kind of do this motion of looking at your watch to get the display to turn on to be able to see what time it is, where MetaWatch or Pebble are always on and they'll always show you the time no matter what. And so that's one thing. I think the lack of physical buttons on the Gear, it only has one physical button. I think if they would have put a couple more buttons on there, they could have made them shortcuts to different apps. And I think that's really actually a good thing, because your use case for a watch is you're on the go a lot of times, you're walking, and you're trying to sync up both your hand and your wrist and get them kind of in one motion so you can swipe or navigate or record or do whatever it is that you're trying to do on your watch. Where having a physical button that you can actually grab onto and feel it press would be a really nice thing. And so I think the lack of physical buttons is actually a problem for this kind of device. And then none of these watches actually have cell service or GPS. None of these smartwatches do. Some of the running watches have GPS, but no cell service. And so I think for this watch to stand on its own and to really gain adoption, it's going to have cell service and GPS and things like that. You need to be able to make an emergency call. You need to be able to have Bluetooth that goes to your headphones so you can go on a jog without having to carry your phone with you. And I think if they can do that, I think there's a real good future in something like the Gear being a viable kind of consumer product. And I tried to use it as that when I went to DC last month. So I tried to use the Gear primarily as my mobile device, as though it were my mobile device. And I tried to use the Note 3 as though it were a tablet. It kind of fell short because of the lack of GPS. So I don't know DC well enough to just kind of get around, and so I had to refer to the map some. And then, on the side, like I sent some really funny text messages to people, specifically to my wife. I'm on the parking bus, going from the parking lot at the airport to the actual terminal on my way out of town, and I try to send her a message using voice on the Gear, and I send her, I'm on the party bus rather than on the parking bus. But I didn't notice it because of the way the screen was laid out. It kind of covered up some of the text. And so I think, and this happened a few different times, and so I don't think it's quite there yet. If you had a Bluetooth headset, it might be a little bit better. But I think there's a future in having a watch with cellular and GPS and being able to rely on that as an independent device, and then using a tablet to create content and things like that. So those are kind of my experiences with some of the wearables on the market. Now, this is experiences, period. This is the experiences that these kinds of devices provide. And so, if I think about, I said earlier that I think that these devices are sort of the new front end of design for mobile. And so what can these devices actually do? I think the three things that they really do is they kind of log information, they notify, and they allow someone to take action. So I'll kind of go through those. So logging, this is sort of the classic fitness band example. And Apple has filed some patents recently about logging humidity and temperature and things like that with the device. And you can imagine that these devices could record the environment for analysis and playback, and to some extent they do currently. But I think the thing to remember about this is logging is just one part of it. So usually you log, but then you go ahead and you measure something that you've logged, and then you infer something from those measurements, and then you notify or act based on those inferences. So logging isn't kind of an end to itself, but we usually do something based on those things. And then notifications. So there are three kinds of notifications that I think of when I think about these things. The first is lazy notifications. So these are silent and mostly always visible. These include things like current weather, current time, most sports scores. Like I don't want a notification for each basket in an NBA game. I don't want to be buzzed for each basket in an NBA game. However, I do want to be buzzed about certain things, and I'd call those things nudges. So active notifications or nudges. These are things like text messages, email, stock information, step counts achieved, final scores, or maybe scores in the red zone for football for your favorite team, something like that. And this is just kind of a, hey, there's some new information that you might want to know about. I'm going to kind of notify you about that. And then the third type are prompts or notifications for actions. So I'm saying, hey, you have a friend request, you should do something about that. Or you have a phone call, you need to do something about that. Or maybe it's time to take your daily picture, or you just had a flight change and you need to do something about that flight change. Your flight's delayed, whatever it does. So lazy notifications, nudges, and prompts are kind of the three things that I think of. And then if you've prompted them to do some action and it's on the device itself, you can do certain tasks. And so the rest of these are kind of tasks that you can do on the devices. So the first one is communicate. So Gear and Glass both allow you to do voice calls, text messages, and things like that. You're taking some action on the device. The next one is recording. So this is a picture of the White House that I took on the Samsung Gear. Gear and Glass both allow you to record video, photos, take audio notes, things like that. And in a sense, your fitness trackers record some of your movements and things like that. That's kind of in the logging category, but anyway, that's another function or another task that you can do. Find. So I can find information. So in this case, I'm talking about Evernote and finding information, but Glass allows for web searches. I'm not sure if the new version of Gear does, but you can find information with these devices. And then consume. So Pocket for Gear will read you an article out loud that you've saved. And the picture here is of Braggy, which is they're making these earbuds that are in-ear earbuds, but they will allow you to do gestures, and they have some music storage, and they're totally wire-free. And so you can use them to consume music or as you're working out or doing some other activity. So you can consume with these devices. You can also control. Samsung Gear will allow you to control other Samsung devices, but most of the watches specifically will allow you to control the music on your smartphone. That's a pretty standard thing. Verify. So this is NIME, I believe is the pronunciation, and it will allow you to verify your identity to various operating systems and apps and things like that, if I understand correctly, based on your heartbeat. So their theory, at least, is that your heartbeat is specific to you, sort of like your fingerprint, and you can verify your identity using this band. And then comfort. I really wrestled with the name of this slide, and I don't think I got it right. But the idea here is this is the cuff armband or jewelry, and they're specifically designed for women, which that's one of the kind of the current moods in the press is that these wearables haven't been designed for women, and I generally agree. And so they're specifically targeting women, but the idea here is that there's some personal security piece to it, where if you squeeze this certain part of your jewelry, it'll send your location and an SOS message to a select group of people. And so if you feel like you're in physical danger, if you're out walking, if you're in a city, whatever it is, and you need some help, you can send an SOS message to someone, which is pretty cool functionality. And it's great design, I think, which is something that's been lacking from this market traditionally. And then there are other functionalities as well. So you've got the Mimu glove, and this is Imogen Heap. She's a musician, and she's been developing this glove with some other people, and they're hoping to sell it to musicians to control music in live environments specifically. Okay, so the next question, I think, is I've got all these capabilities, I've got all these things that I can do with these devices. How do I actually design using this information? So sort of the first aspect of designing is logging again, and for logging, this is mostly hardware based, and so as UX designers, we're not necessarily going to be able to influence this. If we were designing the hardware product, we could influence this, but we can't necessarily influence this as UX software designers. However, as I mentioned earlier, there's this kind of loop that you go through where you log, and then you measure, infer, and then notify or act. And I think as UXers, we can actually kind of influence the backside of that, the measure, infer, and notify or act. So not necessarily the logging, but the things that we do after that. And this is the narrative clip. It'll kind of take pictures as you go through your day and then try to craft a narrative of your day. And then notifications or notifying, really it comes down to this slide. For me, this is my attempt to kind of understand notifications. And so you can see on the left there's the extent of information, and at the bottom there's the chance of action. So how much information am I trying to convey, and then the chance of action based on that information. And this is just kind of to help me wrap my head around what sort of notifications belong where, and how to do those best. So you can kind of see on the bottom left, you've got sports scores, current weather, current time, step count. Those are our lazy notifications. And then kind of in the middle, you've got these nudges, these things that, hey, you might need to know about this, but I'm not sure if you're going to actually take action on it. Like GPS directions, I personally have kind of set GPS in motion, but then I haven't actually needed it, and so I've kind of ignored it. Same with text messages. Text messages are, at their core, asynchronous. So I write a message, I send it, and then you can write your message in reply whenever you want to. And then you've got prompts on mostly on the far right, where you've got these alarms and phone calls and flight changes or delays. These are really important things that people generally have to respond to. The next thing I would say is, for any notifications, you need to think about information needs. And we created, at Sabre, we created an information map for day of travel. Um, and it's been really helpful to think about the information in physical locations that's needed for a specific task. And so I would say, as you're designing your application, think about the information that people need, but think about where it might be in their day or in the physical world. And that kind of goes along with what environment are they going to be in when they're consuming this information. So are they on their bike? Are they in the car? Are they shopping? Are they with their kids? What sorts of environments are they in? And with that comes this threshold for action. So how much would it take for me to take my phone out of my pocket? If I'm with my kids, it better be good, because my kids will want my phone if I take it out of my pocket. Or if I'm in social situations like a meeting, it's sort of rude to check your phone. In some situations. Or if I'm carrying my groceries, I'm not necessarily going to check my phone. I might receive a notification on my watch, but you kind of need to think about, are you prompting them, or are you just going to kind of give them some information and it's passive? And how important really is that information? And then I think you've got this idea of taking action. And so let's say you get them to take action. Well, where should they take action? Like, what's the appropriate interface to use for them to take action? So I created this action/device continuum where you've got the complexity of the interaction versus the complexity of the interface. Then you can kind of see down at the bottom, you've got like single or few buttons in an example of the Jawbone icon or the Pebble watch. And then you've got small touch/gesture, which is the Samsung Gear. You've got a voice plus screen, which is glass. Then you've got kind of your mobile tablet and your full computer. And so this is a lot of information, so I kind of broke it up. But if you think about a grocery list and tasks involved in a grocery list, this is kind of how it maps out. It's really hard to edit a grocery list with something less than a mobile phone. And it's really hard to create a list or add an item to a list without voice and a screen of some sort. And of course you can kind of check off a list or view a list with very minimal buttons. And so we can do this for photo tasks. So masking a photo generally needs to happen on a computer with a mouse and a keyboard or something like that. Airbrushing a photo, you could imagine doing that on a tablet with some sort of stylus. And then adjusting photo levels or cropping the photo. You can do some of that with voice on glass, but generally speaking, you're probably going to want a mobile phone to do that. And so you can kind of map out, you could imagine a set of tasks or a set of a type of thing that you wanted to do, photography, music, grocery lists, whatever it is, and then you can kind of map out the tasks and choose where you want to enable the user to do those tasks. And so a computer would have the ability to do all these things, but a watch could only do a subset of those things. And then the other considerations, considering your screen size, considering your platform, considering whether you're using third-party devices or not, and maybe being careful of the connectivity issues, being careful of device overlap. So, in testing all these things out, my wrist is buzzing, and the glass is telling me that I have notifications, and my phone's still buzzing, and all this stuff. And all of that will improve when you go down to a single ecosystem and the ecosystem matures. So if you have all Apple products and the ecosystem is fairly mature, then you shouldn't have those things happen. Or if you've got all Samsung products or whatever. But currently that's happening, and so I think you kind of need to think about that when you're designing. This slide, I didn't know where else to put it, but this is sort of helpful for me to kind of think about how much is a certain device relying on the mobile mainframe. The more autonomous, so the more to the right the device is, the less it relies on the connectivity to the actual device. So the more on the right it is, excuse me. The more to the left it is, the more it relies on the device, and the more important connectivity is. So the Pebble Watch, the MetaWatch, Jawbone Icon, the Chromecast, those all rely heavily on the mobile phone. And so it's just kind of to say, if you're designing for these specific devices, be aware of how important that connectivity is. So then the last question I had was, what is the future of these things? And this is Will.i.am. He is supposed to be developing a smartwatch/phone. I don't know if it'll actually happen. I don't know if it'll be good. I'm not holding my breath, but that would be awesome. So we'll see what happens. But aside from that, here are kind of my sort of thoughts or predictions about the future of wearables. I think fashion matters. Early adopters don't generally care. They like kind of this nerd thing. But this is a problem for glass specifically, but it's a problem for the fitness trackers. It's a problem for the smartwatches for sure. The fitness trackers, in a way, get over this because they're kind of a badge for I care about my health. And that's sort of a source of pride. But for watches specifically, to replace a watch, you have to have some decent fashion unless they're an early adopter. And this is where the talk about designing for women comes in as well. There's not much out there that's fashionable in the wearable space for women. The Motorola Moto 360, which is supposed to be released this summer, is the first smartwatch that I've seen that is really kind of fashion forward, or comparable to current watches out there in a fashion sense. Touch is not the holy grail. So touch only is not the holy grail. I think there need to be physical buttons on devices. And haptic feedback is not enough, I don't think. Specifically with watches, I think this is the case. And I talked about that with the Samsung Gear. I think fitness bands will largely disappear into either jewelry or smartwatches. So we're seeing this with Samsung Gear. If you're wearing the Gear, you don't really need your fitness band anymore. It does all those things, and sometimes more. It'll take your heart rate if you stop to do that, or it'll count your steps and things like that. And then I don't know why that there's not like a hemp or a leather band for my Fitbit that I can buy off of Etsy right now. But I think eventually it'll be that way. I think the connectivity, especially for third-party devices, needs to resolve before there is mass adoption. So you saw this with my wife earlier, where she kind of put the device away because she was having connectivity issues, and that was frustrating for her. Early adopters are a little bit more forgiving, but the general public is not. As I said, native devices, Samsung's native devices, Google's native devices, seem to have gotten this issue resolved. I think the next adoption hump for smartwatches will include cell connectivity. Again, I think you need to be able to go for a walk or a run or go somewhere with just your watch, being able to make an emergency phone call if you need to, being able to create some content, a text message, whatever, on the fly if you need to, without toting your mobile device around with you, your cell phone around with you. And I think once we get this, there will be a lot wider adoption because people will be able to kind of choose whether they want the watch with connectivity or the phone or both. I think OS consolidation will bring better UX. So when Apple has an OS, when Android has an OS, and there may be one or two more, but I think as people adopt these operating systems, the UX will get better for these devices. And I think my biggest prediction is I think the mobile mainframe actually moves to the wrist. And that's an optional thing. I think people will be able to have their smartphones, but for some of us, we're going to go to wrist primarily. And then if that happens, then content creation is primarily a tablet plus a headset. So a Bluetooth headset paired with my watch, and then a tablet if I really need to type things out or read or whatever it is. So those are my predictions, my bold predictions. Thank you for listening to my talk. Here's the information for getting to the slideshow or contacting me. I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn. So thank you.